Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Enterprise Security. Be the hunter or the hunted. The choice is yours. Brought to you by Dark Reading and In the Game, and broadcast by UBM. I'm Curtis Franklin, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the folder icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during this webinar. Just type your question into the Q&A window to the right of the presentation window, and then click the Submit button. At the end of the webinar, we'll ask you to complete our feedback form. Your feedback will provide us with valuable information on how we can improve future events. You can also launch the survey at any time by clicking on the red Survey button at the bottom of the console. At this time, we recommend you disable any pop-up blockers. If you experience any technical problems, please type your issue into the Q&A text area, and we will be glad to offer one-on-one assistance. Now, on to the presentation, Enterprise Security, Be the Hunter or the Hunted, the choice is yours. Discussing today's topic will be Mike Nichols, Principal Product Manager for Endgame. Mike Nichols is the Principal Product Manager at Endgame, managing the Endgame Cyber Operations Platform. Mike leverages years of commercial and federal product development experience, as well as his time as an Army cyber intelligence analyst to ensure the product has a superior workflow to existing methods and optimizes the analyst's time. He divides his time between internal engagement with engineering and customer support and external engagement with existing customers and new sales prospects in order to best understand the needs of the customer and ensure proper translation to mission-enabling features. Prior to working at Endgame, Mike served in a variety of technical leadership roles at Fort Scale, General Dynamics Fidelis Cybersecurity Solutions, and Deloitte. Mike served in the U.S. Army as Military Intelligence Specialist, supporting Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. With that, Mike, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining the discussion today. Today I want to talk about this new discussion point we're having in the enterprise security world, which is hunting. Talk about what hunting is and some of the challenges that current hunters face, and giving you a different type of way to approach the problem, an offensive mindset approach to your defensive security. I want to start off in the beginning here describing what adversary hunting really is, give you a good solid understanding of what that term means. It's being thrown around by a lot of companies now and has many different meanings throughout the industry. I want to give you a solid definition of how we view adversary hunting and where our definition comes from, as well as describing some ways in which you can actually employ adversary hunting today in your environment. From that, I want to move on to some common techniques that are utilized for hunting and some of the challenges that are faced with those techniques, including indicator searching, network hunting, and endpoint hunting. We're going to talk about a common theme that exists across these hunt techniques, especially the challenges they face, discuss a little bit about automation and how the Endgame product is built to help the automation inside of the enterprise environment, and finally summarize with some best practices and answer any questions you might have. So let's begin by talking about adversary hunting. Again, this is a term you may have heard more and more now, especially as new summits are stood up about threat hunting or adversary hunting. We're starting to see surveys published about this. It's becoming one of the newest terms that are being thrown about by the marketing teams in these organizations. But it's been done for a while inside of the Department of Defense. Specifically, about 3 or 4 years now, they've been focused on adversary hunting. So let's talk about what that really means. And the high-level summary here, the simple definition is adversary hunting, it's really incident response without an incident. The idea is investigating your network in a different way, not waiting for an alert to take place to guide you to look at systems, because as we see by many of the statistics behind this, that waiting for alerts just does not seem to work. Every year we see reports that discuss how long it takes to find the adversary, to discover the adversary inside the environment. Depending on which report you believe, they're all in the numerous hundreds of days. 150 to 250 days seems to be the average that most of these advanced infections take to be discovered inside the organization, meaning the adversary is living in that environment for that period of time. And the even scarier statistic is that over 50% of these detections are still occurring from outside the organization. Other people are finding the problem and then reporting that problem to the organization to tell them that there's an infection. So it's obvious that this current model of sitting back in a SOC and waiting for alerts to take place to guide you to the issue is not solving the problem. And every year we're spending more money, billions and billions of dollars, on new defense technologies that are just incrementally helping the solution, bringing us from 200 days to 190. So solutions and technologies in the current space are just not going to work. What we need to do is think about things in a different way, have a different methodology to the way we employ security. And that started out in the federal government. The DoD created these teams called cyber protection teams. They're part of the larger cyber mission force. And these teams are specifically tasked with threat hunting throughout organizations. And the goal of these teams is to lay on top of a security operations center, basically be an augmentation to that security operations center, focus on a specialized set of assets, whether they're already defined critical assets or a specific enclave or a specific mission set, and just assume that that enclave has been infected. Assume that the adversary is already there, that they're in a compromised environment, and look for the adversary without having an indicator to find the adversary. Use their knowledge of the network, their knowledge of their business, and the knowledge of what they know adversaries do to identify the techniques and behaviors of the bad guys and find them. And this is a really key difference of opinion, a different idea and different way to approach security. Because, of course, you still need the Security Operations Center that's looking at alerts and gathering back data. That's a necessary point to security, but it's not sufficient. So this new technique or approach, this new team, can now provide additional layer of security by going after the assets that are most important to you and ensuring they're free and clear of the adversary. So, Curtis, on to you to ask the question that's been presented.
Thank you very much. And we have the first of our poll questions today. This poll question is, are you doing any hunting today? Your options are yes, no, or somewhat. Now, please select your answer by clicking on the radio button to the left of the text, then be sure to click on the submit button at the bottom right. Now, this is the first of 3 poll questions we'll be asking today, and then we do want to remind you that you can participate in the Q&A session, which will be at the end of the presentation, by asking your questions at any time during the presentation. Well, let's go ahead, Mike, and see what our audience is telling us about their hunting. 44% say that they're not doing any hunting. A quarter say that they are, and almost a third say that they're dabbling in it. Interesting information, and we want to thank all of our audience members for participating in this poll. We'll look forward to seeing your participation in the next poll coming up in a few moments. Mike, I'll turn things back over to you.
Thank you so much. So I appreciate those answers, and that's pretty indicative of what we're seeing throughout the commercial industry. More companies are starting to build these hunt teams, starting to define hunt solutions and hunt methodologies to their existing security teams, but it's, of course, not widespread across the industry yet, and that's what we're hoping to talk with you about today. So the next question, besides what is hunt, is who is hunting? Who can start hunting? This is a common question we get from prospects we talk to about, well, am I able to hunt? Do I have the techniques or the capabilities to hunt in my organization? And most likely you do. If you look at this, typical layout, I won't go in depth on the differentiations here, but inside of your security operations center, you typically have multi-tiered analysts. Your tier 1 and tier 2 are the ones that are, responding to alerts, determining if those alerts are false positives or true hits, providing some initial incident analysis, and then passing over to an incident response team, which is at tier 3 typically. But inside of that tier 3, there's usually breakouts of malware reverse engineering, intelligence experts, and now we're starting to see hunters that are spawned out of that tier 3 as well. And that's because the hunter really has a strong knowledge of not just determining if what they're seeing is malicious, but also the right way to respond to that problem, the right way to clean that up inside the organization. But the red team is also something to think about. If you're doing current vulnerability assessment or penetration testing or red teaming, that type of skill set is perfect for a hunter because again, the hunter does not have a prior reason to investigate a network, or at least an indicator of compromise that's drawing them to that. But they do know the business, right? They understand that this specific area of the business might be critical during a certain time period. For example, point-of-sale systems might be critical to analyze during holiday seasons, for example. So knowing the business, understanding where you would attack is really crucial. Putting on that adversary hat is a crucial piece to being a hunter. And the next question is really, how do I hunt? And we view hunting across a 4-step process that we call the hunt cycle. And really, it's 4 main components on how I can go into an environment and conduct the full process of discovery and defeating that adversary. The first step there is what we call survey, and that is really understanding the network, right? Performing that initial reconnaissance of the environment to understand where the assets are, what the assets are, and what are the criticality of those assets in the environment. And then, of course, gathering data off those assets to do the next few steps of the cycle. So the first step is really, getting into the environment and understanding the environment. Once you're on the assets, the next step is to secure in some way, provide some type of mitigation strategies, whether it's network or endpoint. You want to have a way to lock out the adversary's ability to do further damage to the network if they are in the environment. Provide some way to prevent the advanced techniques that they might be implementing so that they cannot run away from where you're looking. If you are hunting on some enclave and they see you coming and then just move somewhere else, that defeats the purpose and you waste a lot of time. So locking that adversary in, preventing their ability to further impact the business while you try to find them is crucial to the hunt strategy. The next step is, of course, to find them. This is the most important piece here of the hunter, is to actually find the bad guy, the detection step. And this is really crucial, especially because hunting is not as easy as many of the sort of traditional detection techniques. Meaning, I can't just take a list of known hashes or known bad IPs and put them in a system and have them spit out the adversary, because the belief here that this advanced adversary has already defeated your defenses means that they're not using known indicators. They're not using things that have been previously discovered. They are unique to your organization. So how do I find an adversary if I don't have an indicator to tell me where they are? And this is where, again, it takes the knowledge that you have of how to investigate and find the bad guy. You do things like outlier analytics, which is the ability to search the entire network for things like running processes, and then sort those processes by uniqueness. So you start to find ones that are not running on a majority of the systems. And this just becomes a breadcrumb or an initial space for you to, as the hunter, to go investigate. It's a reason to go look at a system, but not a smoking gun that their adversary is there. That takes the intelligence of the hunter to then figure out if what they found is truly a new indicator of compromise. And of course, the final step is it's not good enough to just find the bad guy and tell your boss about it. You actually have to do something about it. You have to find a way to evict that adversary from the environment to stop damage and loss from occurring to your enterprise. So once you've discovered this new problem, you've discovered a potential new indicator discovery, you've proven out that it is the adversary, you've searched and found how deep they are in the network, now what do? And response includes many things, whether it's quarantining that asset so that it cannot further spread throughout the network. It's removing the adversary from that system by taking out the specific backdoor that they have on the asset. But you have to be able to do whatever the response action is. It has to be able to act at scale so you can respond to the entire environment, and it has to be surgical in that if you by nature of hunting, you're hunting on what are usually high-value assets or critical assets. You have to respond in a way that maintains the stability of these assets. For example, if you are responding on top of a server that is generating revenue for you, if you crash that server, you're not losing revenue. And what is more impactful to you, the adversary sitting there or the revenue getting lost? So you need to find a way that you can actually respond in a way that maintains the stability of your assets, but also removes the adversary's ability to conduct their job. So let's talk about common techniques that people are employing today to hunt, and ways in which, of course, you can start to hunt in the environment as well. The first thing, and this is the most common thing we hear from many people, is, yes, I'm hunting, I'm taking intelligence and searching for it throughout my organization. And what I'd say to you is, great, fantastic, I'm glad you're doing that. However, it's not really hunting. It is a crucial step of security. Your security operations center should be doing this. It is a necessary component to your business. You should be taking intelligence, especially targeted intelligence, for example, join an ISAC group in your vertical, take intelligence for that specific vertical that's targeting others, and use that to look in your organization for adversaries that might be unknown to you. However, by definition of what hunting really is, it's not true hunting because you're looking for known problems that you just missed with your tools, not a new adversary or an existing adversary using brand new tools and techniques inside the environment. So again, it is extremely imperative you do this. It should be part of your security operations, but however, it's not hunting. But that indicator hunting you're doing, indicator searching you're doing, is a great muscle memory for what your hunter needs to do once they discover a new indicator. Very, very common, once you find the problem through outlier detection or other means, you will discover a new indicator that was not previously known. And you need to find a way to then discover the extent of the breach by taking that indicator and driving throughout the environment to find where else that is. So indicator searching is a pivotal piece of hunting and of security operations, but by itself it is not a hunting methodology. So let's move into network hunting. Network hunting is a great way to start hunting an organization quickly and with minimal overall changes to your current workflow, right? You can take a network device, you can hang it off a span port or a tap, and start to do some analysis right away. And I would recommend that if you're not doing this already, you start doing this right away. It's a great initial entry into hunting. However, there's some challenges here in what happens. And part of this problem is that although hunting may seem new to some commercial organizations, it's been done for many, many years in the federal government. And because of that, the adversaries that you're facing that you really care about, these people behind keyboards that are coming to attack your environment, they know that hunting is taking place. They know that being an outlier is a bad thing. So they've developed techniques and procedures in their attacks that they're already implementing that allow them to hide amongst the rest of the noise in the environment, which makes what is a new methodology to you of hunting difficult if you're not implementing it in the right way. So some challenges here on network hunting would be things like being able to use common network protocols to hide. A great example is the dire banking malware that's very common right now. And just in a recent blog post here late last year from Trend Micro, we see that they're using SSL to hide the data that's being transmitted outside of the organization. Now, of course, we know that SSL is not new. This is just one example of many malware that are using this, many adversaries that are using this. But the point is to emphasize, if you were to right now take your statistics of your network, I would promise you that SSL is over half of your traffic. So if the majority of your company is using SSL outside of the gateway, and now just one more transmission is added to SSL, how do you find that? How is that proverbial needle in a sack of needles discovered? So it is difficult to find some of these adversaries employing techniques like this if you're just using basic outlier analysis from the network itself. Another common tool that the adversary is doing is they're watching the trends of the industry, and they're of course adopting the same type of revenue increasing or speed type of technologies that we do. So for example, cloud technologies are fantastic for enterprises. They allow us to work across in disparate locations and have remote workers and collaborate. Fantastic tools. However, that means that now you have more and more traffic leaving your enterprise, which is okay. It's okay for my asset to be communicating out of my network into the cloud because it's part of my daily routine for work. So if that's the case, what great thing the adversaries are doing is saying, well, look, if this is common, let me just take that same route and utilize that for my command and control. So a great example here is Cloud Duke. Last year, again, we saw another blog post saying that Cloud Duke was observed using basic cloud sites. In this case, it was Microsoft OneDrive for command and control. So basically what this means is you have an organization of people that might be using OneDrive to store files and collaborate across the environment. And again, it's one more communication going to OneDrive. How do you determine if that communication is malicious versus the tens of thousands of other OneDrive communications that are happening? And these advanced adversaries are definitely they're performing reconnaissance on your network. They know what is typical from your network. So they'll know if you utilize OneDrive versus 365 versus Apple iCloud or Twitter, Facebook, whatever is common to come out of your organization, they'll utilize that same thing as a command and control technique. In fact, we saw common sites like Reddit be used as command and control as well. So it's very easy for an adversary to take what is normal in your network, hide amongst the normal, and utilize that for their advanced communications. And then finally, on the endpoint side, or the network side, another thing we see, which is very, very common, is this low and slow beacon type connectivity of adversaries. And this is really to get around that sort of analysis of a moment in time that these hunt tools do. Pulling back all the current network communications and looking for weirdness, even if I was an adversary not hiding in any of these normal ways, I was just doing a plain old connection back to my C2 domain in some country out there. If I was doing a randomized beacon, meaning only once every couple hours I was actually active for a few seconds, the chances of you finding that in your moment in time analysis are very, very slim, because they would just, the probability that they're going to pop up in that report are not there. They also randomize the time they're doing this. They don't show up in that persistent sort of heartbeat analysis. So if you put it into an analytic platform and look for, what are the repetitive ongoing things that coming out of my network, there isn't a basic sort of heartbeat that is caused by these products. And these things are built into all the common red teaming tools that are out there. And red teaming tools are just a reflection of what the adversary is doing, because their job as red team is to impersonate adversaries. So common tools like Cobalt Strike, Metasploit, and others all employ this low, slow, beacon-like activity that makes it very, very difficult for network hunters to be able to find anomalies in the environment. So knowing all this and seeing the challenges that are faced, many companies, once they start network hunting, will then begin to also entertain the idea of actually going down to the asset itself and doing hunting on that as well, to get a higher level of fidelity on the data. And really, hunting on that endpoint, on that asset, is the best way to get as close to the attack as possible, right? Get down as low as possible in the system and try to get as much information as possible about what's happening on the attack. However, of course, there are also challenges on the endpoint, just as there were challenges on the network side. For example, the same exact challenges you saw on the network will be in place on the endpoint if you're trying to do network-type analytics on the endpoint. For example, pulling back things like NetStack communications. Another example of sort of common hiding techniques in the network side would be like using Twitter or Pastebin or Dropbox. And here's a great example: APT29 just last year released a report where they were using Twitter as command and control. And again, if you are a company that allows Twitter outside of your gateway, that will be one of the tens to not hundreds of thousands of communications happening that are going out to Twitter. So how do I find that? And on top of all this, communication is probably encrypted as well. So it just makes it very difficult, even at the endpoint, to understand the network communications anomalies that may exist. Gone really are the days where the advanced adversary is going to be communicating back to his sole IP address that no one else utilizes, that is in some country of origin that you're looking for. They really try to hide amongst the common platforms that people utilize today. Another common problem or challenge that we face on the endpoint is the idea of outlier anomaly on things that are deeper into the system. So outlier analysis on the network, we talked about those challenges. What happens if you try to do outlier analysis on what's running on a system? And then this is one of the most common things that an incident responder or a hunter is going to do when they first deploy. They're going to pull back things like the auto runs locations to look for persistence. They're going to pull back the running processes to look for strange processes running and try to find the weirdness, try to find what's strange. A big issue with that, though, is what if the adversary isn't an anomaly? What if they're not strange? For example, what if they're using common tools, like here the poison injection tool, which allows the adversary to inject into a common system process? Basically saying that if I'm an adversary, I'm not going to run as evil.exe. I'm going to inject myself into things like services.exe. Then if I run and enumerate all the running processes throughout the environment and try to find a statistical outlier, I won't find it because he's inside services and everything is running services. So it makes it very difficult to use that common sort of technique of outlier analytics just purely on running processes. The other challenge is, what if they just get down to the kernel and try to hook everything away? If you are using a user mode type application on the endpoint, which unfortunately many endpoint tools still stick in that user mode space, you can easily get around that by hooking NetStat, hooking PS list, and not showing up inside of those things, so that when the operating system asks what's running, the adversary just lies and says back, not me, and then you'll never find it. And then, of course, there's many common rootkits now that do these types of things, so that you will still not find that anomalous process because they're not letting the operating system tell you that it's running. And all these challenges, we feel, are really what's leading to the fact that we just keep on getting breached. These are the numbers I talked about a little bit earlier. For example, 146 days for average time of discovery of a breach. More than half of those breaches, 53%, are being discovered by third parties, not by the company that's infected themselves. And it's just not solving the problem. We have to find a different way to approach this. More and more defensive security tools are not the answer. They are necessary, but not sufficient to solve this problem. Instead, you have to take a proactive approach. You have to take the smart people that you're employing and give them a better mission. Give them a mission to go out in the environment and look at the assets that are high-valued assets to you, discover those, and then start to analyze those, looking for certain problems. To the point of indicator searching here, we see that at least, somewhere between the order of 70 to 90% of all malware samples are unique to every organization that gets infected. So this threat intelligence you're getting, again, is necessary but not sufficient. You can't rely on intelligence as a main means of detecting the adversary, because if the sample is new to you, it's not going to be in that indicator list, and you're not going to find it. As we said before, network hunting has gaps. Endpoint hunting can be defeated by hiding. It's just a lot of challenges to hunting. So although it's a fantastic means at finding the adversary, there are challenges in implementing it. So of course, let's talk about how to address those challenges. Let's talk about ways in which you can make threat hunting better in your organization. And really, there's a common theme. If you notice in all the different challenges I talked about, there's really a common theme that is spread across these, and that's that the adversary is hiding from you. Right? This is their job. This is their main goal is for you not to detect them. They put a lot of money and a lot of investment into ensuring that you don't find them in the environment. And it's crucial for you to understand that the adversary is trying to evade you as much as possible. And it's not just evading you in detection. You have to understand that they're also evading you based on the tool sets you're running. And what do I really mean by that is it goes into this, and we call it really living low here at Endgame. And the idea of trying to evade the adversary as much as the adversary is trying to evade you. Because the adversary is looking for your defensive tool suites, and they're doing different techniques and different things on the endpoints based on the tools that they find running. In the best case scenario, which is a deployment of defensive tools in a pre-compromised situation, meaning I'm going to the asset before the adversary is there. I'm getting to go and put my security tools onto a box before the adversary has compromised the box. This is the best case scenario. This is what we can get to, right? The problem is the first thing an adversary does during exploitation is they don't bring their tool set, drop it to disk, and let you find it. They don't honk their horn and shout "we're here" right away. The first thing they do during the initial exploit is do reconnaissance of the asset that they're on and try to identify anything that might be there to detect their presence. They're going to try to enumerate and discover currently running defensive tools, and if they're there, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to change their tactics, meaning they might get off the system altogether, or they're going to disable the tools that are there and continue to work. You would be surprised to go to some of your current endpoint technologies and realize how many of them can be turned off with simple command lines arguments or command line or inside of the system. Things like netstop and others can actually shut down the tools, as well as there's many exploits out there that can also turn these tools off. So it's imperative that your defensive tools are, one, try to hide, they don't show up in these initial lists, and two, try to prevent themselves from being disabled, right? Actually take their own security into consideration on the endpoint. Great example of this is this Viking malware that already, it has basically a automatic enumeration of processes. It has a built-in list of services and hashes that it looks for, and if it finds these things and implements the means at which it knows it disables it, it'll actually implement it and can shut down antivirus. And you can go through the news in the past couple of years, and there's major breaches out there that have happened where the first step the adversary did was disable the endpoint technology, endpoint security, and then they basically had free reign onto that system, and they weren't found. So with that, I'm going to pass it over for the next question here over to Curtis.
Thank you so much. And our next question is, are you hidden in your network from the adversary? Now, your possible answers are yes, no, or somewhat. Please select one of these responses by clicking in the radio button to the left of your text. Then be sure and click on that big submit button at the bottom of the box. Now, this is the second of our 3 poll questions. There's one more poll question to come, and then there's the Q&A at the end of the presentation. And as a reminder, you can participate in that Q&A by submitting your question at any time during the presentation. I'll give you just one more second to get all of those responses in and the system to catch up. And Mike, let's take a look at what the audience is telling us. Over half say that they are not hidden in the network from the adversary. Only 6% say they are. 40% somewhat hidden, which I suspect in your world means that they're not really hidden at all. But I'll let you pick up with that and continue. I'll see you again for the third poll question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I would agree with you on the, it depends on what we define somewhat to be, but it really is more of a binary option of you're either found or you're not in the network in general, and being evaded that way. And this is not uncommon. Again, we won't name names here, but there are vendors that have large deployments that actually have utilized the same hash or same signature throughout every customer. And this kind of thing is very scary because one customer gets compromised, the signature gets written for that tool. Now that signature is baked into the malware that they utilize into the rest of the companies that they attack, and that means easy detection, easy disabling of those tools throughout the organization. So it is a common theme we see of easy to discover endpoint technologies in the network. In fact, go on your system right now and just run a PS list or task manager and see what's there, and I'm sure you'll see them. So we talked about the best case scenario, that pre-compromise scenario. This is the scary one for everybody out there, both vendor and customer alike, which is the post-compromise. This is like worst case scenario. How do you defend an asset that's already been compromised by the attacker? This is going into their home turf at this point. How do you stop this? And this is a really difficult one because the adversary by default is doing some things that make it really easy to find us, the good guys. The first thing is, one of the things the adversaries are doing now, every time they infect a box, is looking for admin logons, and they're doing that because they're trying to steal creds, right? The adversaries are trying to get new administrative credentials so they can go deeper and deeper in your network. They can have numerous backdoors, numerous ways into the environment. So they have already built tool sets that look for admin logons and notify them when it happens and try to extract those keys from memory. But a side benefit of that, and one of the side effects of being able to notice those things, is they can also tell when the admin logs in. And what they're starting to do, what we see being employed now, is that they will steal the creds and get off the box right away because they don't know if that admin that's there is actually a security administrator as opposed to a basic IT administrator. So they'll take the credentials so now they can get back in, but they'll leave the asset. That way, if it is a security professional, they can't find them because they've now left the system. Again, so it's if you see them coming, basically see the good guys coming, they're just going to move away. But they're not. It would be naive to think they ran away for good. They didn't run away and leave your organization be. They ran away from that system and went to go find another system to infect. The other problem is when you're found, right? If you see if the adversary is there watching what happens, it's trivial to find new executable files that are being run. There's basic Windows APIs as well as Linux that can tell you, hey, a new executable is being run in this environment, and you can look at what it is and make a determination. And all this is automated for these adversaries. So when they find that, they can do two things. Again, they can leave that asset, which is probably the number one thing that happens. They'll just leave that asset and go somewhere else. Once they have these credentials, they're not worried about maintaining persistence on that individual system because they have your entire network of systems to get back into. So they'll leave that asset because it's important that they aren't discovered. The other thing they could do is just disable that tool from even working. So if they do have some mitigation techniques in place and they see you installing a security tool that they know how to disable, they'll just disable it from running in the first place. So post-compromise, it's very difficult to get a good installation of security tools without the adversary being aware and employing some type of mitigation techniques. So what can we do? What really will help us to stop some of these problems and actually find the adversary? We call it stealth here at Endgame, and it's important to really define what stealth means. For us, nothing is undetectable. It would be crazy. That's like saying we have a silver bullet in security that can stop any problem. There isn't something that's completely undetectable from anyone. Any level of effort at some point can find something. But the goal is to be non-obvious and non-repeatable in the signatures and to make it so that most of the techniques the adversaries have already built will not find tools that you employ in the organization. There's a few things to look at. One is that idea of fingerprinting, and this is a big one that drives me crazy, and that I push people I talk to go talk to their vendors about, which is you need to ensure that whatever you're running in your organization is not the same exact repeated thing that's run somewhere else. It's trivial nowadays for companies to provide you at least a polymorphed file that has a different hash, if nothing else, than the rest of the customer base, and it's just bad form for a vendor to give you the same thing that exists somewhere else. That just basically widens your footprint, widens your ability to be attacked. So that's a big one for us. It's just ensuring that whatever footprint exists on the system, there's a way to change that or at least make it different across customers. This includes not just the hash, but running service names, drivers that may be installed, things like that. Make sure that ask your vendor, what is it that is run everywhere, and am I the same as everybody else, and how do I change that, or how do you change that? The next thing is communications, because of course looking for the outlier is not just the only thing that we do. The adversaries do this as well, and when they're doing the reconnaissance on the asset, they'll look to communications to find weird ones. Find things that they don't know, and if they don't know it, one of the first things they might do is just to leave the asset and go to a different one where that communication doesn't exist, because that communication path might be indicative of talking back to a security platform. So try to find a way to communicate off that asset back to the environment in a covert manner. Whether that means utilizing a common protocol like the adversary does, common location, hiding yourself. We'll talk about these in the best practices here in a few minutes about ideas, but it's important to look at that. So again, when whatever's running your security programs, security tools, pull up NetStat, pull up a look and see what your communications look like, and see if it's obvious to you that there's security tools there. And if it's obvious to you, it's definitely obvious to the attacker. Call your vendor and ask them how to help you fix that problem. And the final one is really low-level access, and this is again a crucial one for if you're utilizing endpoint technologies to hunt. If you have an endpoint technology that just lives in user land, it doesn't have a kernel component to it, just throw that thing away. It doesn't make any sense. The attackers that you're going after are advanced adversaries, and they're in the kernel. If you're not in the kernel, you're in user space, you've already lost the battle. You have to have you have to have security that is down at the kernel as low as possible to try to find the hooked processes and the rootkits that exist in the system so that you can defend yourself against those. So let's take just a minute here to talk about the endgame product and a little bit about our automation on these different steps inside of the hunt cycle. And again, at the end of this, we'll take some Q&A if there's any questions about this. But I'd love to talk to you more about it, of course, and I'll put some contact information in if you're interested to speak more. So let's go back to the hunt cycle. And the hunt cycle is really important because it's really the building block for what it is that you do. How do you define hunting across the organization? One thing you might want to do right now after this talk is to take that hunt cycle and then layer the technologies you currently have across it to see if you have a means to cover each one of these. Whether it's network or endpoint, it's fine. Just ensure that you have a way to cover down on these, especially on the protections, on the security, on the secure side, the detections, and the response side. And you need to find, ensure that you have a way to cover each one of those. And then ask yourself if that's too much of an overall impact on the asset and if you wanted to reduce the overall understanding. So let's talk about the first step in secure, or survey. Survey is really important. We talked a little bit about this before, of the discovery of assets, the ability to find what's out there and know what's in my network. Because you might be shocked, but I'm sure the asset list you have in your environment might not be 100% accurate, right? You might not have a perfect list of what's running in the environment. So have a way to actually discover from systems that are running what else is out there in the network. And of course, from our platform, we have an easy way to scan from any asset and enumerate what's alive, and then pull that back for you to then install into that system. The next thing is the installation piece, and this is really where stealth is a big part of the endgame philosophy, and it goes back to that pre and post compromise installation of systems. We assume everything's post-compromise. We just have to, as a hunting product in a hunting world here, we assume we are going onto a box that the adversary is already on, and we employ as many techniques as possible to hide the fact that we are installing, hide the fact that we're running, and hide the fact that we're communicating. So during the installation process, we actually allow you to install from the platform itself, so not relying on the network operations team to put you into some change window, because again, we're expecting that you're responding to a problem, and you want to try to put that fire out, so speed is a factor. So from the platform itself, you can actually deploy, and we utilize some techniques in the environment that allow you to deploy directly into memory on assets without actually dropping any artifacts at disk, and doing so without creating a giant user profile of an administrator on the system, so that if the adversary is looking for domain admin logins, if the adversary is looking for PE file executions, they're not going to see it because we're staying in memory and not creating a profile on installation. And of course, getting down to the kernel, you got to do that. You have to be there because that's the best way, really the only way to find the advanced adversaries and the best way to employ mitigation strategies. So that brings us into secure. And what should we do while we're there? How do you secure things? What's the plan? And secure is not at this point. I think we all know this, that secure is not running an AV. Signatures, threat indicators, these things are just not stopping the advanced adversaries. So the mitigation techniques you need to think about are tools that employ some type of advanced protections. So on our side, on the endgame side, what we mean by that are things like stopping shellcode injection into memory, stopping exploit preventions without relying on this current means of using dynamic code execution to find it, actually being able to do it without code execution. Being able to do things like discovering malware without signatures, having a signatureless way to detect malware, which is utilizes a layer of data science to extract information to determine if things are good or bad. Stop privilege escalation, actually stop privilege, basically privilege theft or token theft inside of the environment. These are all sort of the technique preventions you would need to employ to stop that adversary from going deeper into the network. So if they do spearfish credentials, they can't get administrative ones out of the user ones they have. Or if they get on a box, they can't laterally move to another box without dropping their toolset to disk, which is where everybody's looking. Right? We're trying to make them be as noisy as possible. Moving into the detection side, this is where we employ both a layer of analytics as well as a layer of deep data collection and anomaly detection to find the bad guy. So the first one, of course, is pulling back massive amounts of deep data from assets and then being able to pivot on different pieces of that to find statistical outliers. Being able to find things like of all the AutoRuns locations, these are the unique things that are running in the environment, and then put a layer of intelligence on top of that, which lets us go back to look at the backing files to see if any of those are malicious based on a signatural malware detection, and say, hey, this AutoRuns is not only unique, but also points to a file that has a malicious look to it, a malicious feel to it. On the side of other areas, things like looking for running processes that have network communications that shouldn't have them. All these kind of ideas are the ways we look for looking for the adversary without having a specific indicator to tell us that the adversary is there. And the final piece, of course, is response. It's not good enough to just find the problem. We got to do something about it. And for us, response is a combination of two things: being scale, being able to do things at scale, and also being able to be surgical on these things. If you look at what a very, very common attacker technique is now, it is to inject themselves into a system process. We talked about it a little bit earlier. For example, injecting into services on a Windows system. If that's the case, and your technologies that can do remediation, all they allow you to do is implement process killing, that's not going to solve the problem without crashing the system. Killing services.exe on a Windows system is going to blue screen the box. And if that is a critical asset or a high-valued asset, that's typically not a good plan to go forward with in remediation. So you need to find a way that you're, again, being down in the kernel, monitoring every individual thread that's executing, take a thread-level response action, being able to individually eject that malicious code out of the system is the key means at which you can respond in a way that maintains the stability of the critical asset and removes the adversary from the system. And the goal here is to do all these in as few layers as possible. So, of course, in the endgame platform, it's one sensor, one platform that does this entire mission. And again, when that exercise we talked about of going back to your organization and layering your tools across these steps, look at the tools that go there, and then, of course, look at the final tool, which would be the piece that pulls them together, and see if that's okay, if that's a reasonable amount of systems for your environment, and if the training level there of how to train up on those systems is reasonable. We usually see about 3, 4, or more systems layered on top of this, including the SIM or the analytic tool that is in addition to solve this mission that you can solve with one platform. And one of the main problems we face today is training. Good security personnel are hard to find. When you find them, they're hard to maintain and hard to retain. If you train somebody on 5 or 6 different products and get them to be SME level on those products to do the mission, and then all of a sudden they leave, do you want to go and train somebody on 5 or 6 more again, or do you just want to have one system, one platform to train on the hunt mission? And that's what we're trying to focus on in Endgame. So with that, I'm going to pass it for the last poll question here over to Curtis.
Thank you, Mike. And as Mike said, it is time for our third and final poll question. That question is, how much automation do you have in your environment today? The options are 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or 76 to 100%. Now, please choose one of these responses by clicking in the radio button to the left of the numbers, then be sure to click on the black Submit button at the bottom right of the window. Now, we've appreciated your responses to our poll so far. Looking forward to seeing what you have to say about this one, and want to remind everyone that you still have plenty of time to get your questions in for the Q&A session, which is coming up in just a few minutes. You can get those questions in at any time by typing them into the Q&A box. Be sure and click on the Submit button there as well. Well, Mike, at this, let's take a look at what our audience is telling us. A third say that they have no automation to 25%, a little over half, 26 to 50, 10%, 51 to 75%, and a lonely 2% say that they are more than 3/4 automated in their enterprise. Now, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this. Looking forward to that and the rest of your presentation. I'll see you in the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, it's probably important to define automation, at least how we see it. We talk about automation a lot, but we also understand that this problem is not going to get machined away. There isn't an easy button that can solve security, especially not to solve the cubicle farms of people attacking your organization. So to us, automation is making your job easier so that you can take your lower trained tier 1, tier 2 people and have them operate at a higher level, make the tier 3 type work easier for them to do, and taking your tier 3 person, allowing them to scale. So if your tier 3 right now can hunt on 20 assets a day, how about we make that 20,000 assets a day? How about we greatly increase what they can do? And that to us is really the goal of automation. There's no way to remove the human element from this, but let's make the human element able to scale in the environment. So finally, let's summarize with some best practices. And I'm going to talk through some of these. And again, I'm also going to give some, I want to try to give you some agnostic approaches on how you can talk to your current vendors and do some current techniques to implement these things. Of course, at the end here, I'll give you a link to talk to us directly at Endgame, and we can try to help you as well. I'd love to give you more information, give you a demo, and talk you through how we employ Hunt throughout the organizations that we support. So best practices to hunt with, and I think some of these you're going to probably not be surprised based on the majority of the talk I've had here. But the first one is I'm going to recommend you got to get on the endpoint. And again, networking, not to put anything against network hunting. I think it's crucial and critical that you do it. It is you can get some great information. You can get some quick wins for sure by getting network hunting. If you don't have it yet, please start doing it. But if you're going to employ a true hunt organization and a hunt methodology, you have to have an endpoint strategy to that as well. You can have both, of course, and both is better than none, right? But being on the endpoint is critical because that's where the attacker is, and that's where the attacker, getting down to the kernel on that system is ensuring that the attacker can't lie to you. So you see the next step there I have is living low. Getting on the asset, getting in the kernel, and ensuring that you can get high fidelity data back to make your decisions about. Another big thing here is protecting assets. And it's funny, when we talk to people that are starting to hunt, they don't think of securing or protecting as a key piece of this. But if you go to the actual doctrine that was written by the DoD years ago in 2012, what they call the Cyber Mission Force doctrine, they called it out way back then that a cyber protection team that is doing threat hunting needs to mitigate the problems on the assets. And that's because your hunt team is the premier. They're the best security personnel you have. That's the top tier. We like to call them here the special forces of the security world, right? To dive in and solve the problem. Let them do everything they can do to stop their problem. And it's not enough just to find it. Let them also lock down and protect assets while they're there. So protection is a big piece to think about. It's not enough to just collect data. You also need to add some kind of layer of advanced protections as well. Evading the adversary, this is probably the most crucial one you can imagine from what we talked about today that I'm most passionate about, is a way in which you can hide from the adversary. And here I have some good tips and good ideas, and I'm happy to talk more as well in the Q&A session about this. Of course, I would recommend you talk to a company like us that have, from the very beginning, built this as a core doctrine of what we do. One of the 3 tentpoles of our product is stealth, and everything we build with that in mind, instead of trying to catch up afterwards with that technology. But if you already have tools you want to try to make stealth, some of the things you can do, of course, the first one I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is going to your vendor and asking them, and look at what's on your endpoint and ask them, how do I change this? Can you change this? Can you make it unique for me? And the beautiful thing of being a customer to a vendor is that you hold all the power, especially when it comes time for renewal, right? They need you to buy the product. They need you to renew their product. So you can make demands from them, especially this. It's crucial that you don't show up with goodguy.exe running on an endpoint. That's not going to stop these advanced adversaries. On the communication side, there's things you can do right now that could really help. One of the things we recommend to everybody is to, again, go back to your systems, run netstat, or ask your vendor, and figure out how it currently communicates. And if you, for example, currently communicate over HTTPS, then go into your enclaves and see what is normal to communicate to HTTPS. And typically it's probably a proxy that you have or a core router. If that's the case, then what you can do is you can actually try to get your endpoints to communicate to that same location and then route that location over to your security tool. So basically make it seem like, or at least your best practices, make it so that your communication to your system looks like the regular user's communications over HTTPS. So utilize firewall rules and other ways in which to take your current comms and mask them among the rest of the communications. The problem is if your vendor communicates over SSL, but they put that over some strange numbered port and it's going to some IP that everything else doesn't communicate to, that's right there an easy outlier that the adversary can find. So try to take that communication and mask it into the rest of the communications that if the vendor's not going to help you do it. And finally, automate. And again, just to define automating here, I'm talking about taking that tier 1 and making them better, taking that tier 3 and making them work faster. We're not going to have an easy button for hunts. We're not advocating an easy button for hunts. In fact, years ago, I was one of the ones that would stand up in front of people and talk against the easy button malware solutions. I didn't believe that they were the right way forward, and it would train your security teams to defund what you needed, which was smart people. I think we as an industry are now past that. We've realized that, and we're now going back to the people issue of staffing and training smart people is the best way to solve our problems. Technology alone will not solve the issues. But the technology you have should not be an impediment or should not be a detriment to your current team. You need to have a tool that fits into your workflow and a tool that accelerates your analyst's time on site to let them do more with less. That's really the key pieces we'd like to get across today. With that, I just want to say thank you. I definitely appreciate the time to talk to you. My email is here. If you go to our website, endgame.com, we have actually demo.endgame.com will bring you right to a location that can schedule a demo with us if you'd like to talk more. Would love to take questions about the product. In the Q&A section, I want to focus on technique and discussions about the talk. But if there's any product questions, again, please contact me or go to our website. We'd love to talk to you more about the product. So with that, I want to pass it over back to Curtis.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Now, before we begin with today's Q&A, please fill out the feedback form that's just opened on your computer. If your pop-up blockers have prevented the form from launching on your computer, you can click the red survey icon on the bottom of your screen. To complete the form, please press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page. We thank you in advance for filling out the feedback form. Your participation in this survey will allow us to better serve you. And now, on to the question and answer portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located to the right of the presentation window, or click the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. Then when you've entered your question, please remember to click the Submit button. Let's see what kind of questions we have here. The first one says, have you found any AV or similar product persisting despite efforts or attempts to disable?
That's a good question. I'm assuming that is in response to the ability for the adversary to disable your security technologies. And yes, there are some that definitely do this. In fact, there's a few AVs that protect themselves and dig themselves deep into the kernel. However, the ones that make disabling difficult, there's also numerous known exploits that can get around that. And I won't name the company that was compromised, but there's definitely a large company you can read about where one of the most common endpoint tools was an exploit was used to disable them to get their mission. And really, I mean, it goes down to the point when the adversary gets in the kernel, they can do anything. It's really difficult at that point to unless you put a lot of effort into it, it's difficult. So, for example, at Endgame, one of the things we do is we actually will lock down the location that we are in and ensure that even if anything is attempted, we will definitely alert you to it. we will prevent it. And in the case that we just can't stop it, where it's just something brand new is happening that we haven't seen or can't protect against, you at least receive an alert that type of attack was done, so that you can then respond to that. That's an indicator for you to realize, well, this is really strange. Something's happening to my system, and it's specific to not that the system is disabled, because that could happen a lot. It's specific to the actual attack technique that's being used against that system.
All right, thank you for that. Now, we have a question that is based on your discussion of red teams. Audience member asks, what methods do you suggest to use for the red team while protecting against insider threats? Can you have a red team and protect against insider threats?
Yeah, good question. So, unfortunately, red teaming doing protection is sort of mixes their duties a bit. And red teaming's main goal really is to exercise the blue team. They would be acting like an insider to ensure that the blue team has the proper ways to detect these issues and basically provide a training piece for that blue team, and then provide some mitigation strategies to employ. The red team mindset, however, like in a hunting team that's there to protect against the insider, there's definitely means in which they can protect against the insider threats. Many of the advanced adversary techniques basically look just like an insider once they get credentials. So things like escalating privileges and stealing credentials are done by both insiders and by advanced adversaries. So finding those is interesting or useful. If they already have the credentials, so there's no theft needed, they're just going to utilize their credentials for difficult or things of interest. Then you're talking about more of again, the outlier detections and the anomaly detections. You're looking for things like that system connecting to a system that it doesn't usually connect to, right? It's now reaching into some database store that doesn't have individual users accessing it. It usually only has certain servers or certain service accounts accessing it. So pulling back active users, parsing the event logs for things like what type of logon and what happened is crucial for that type of activity.
All right. Now, the next question is an assessment question. Can you expand a bit on the process of assessing the kernel level deep in the asset? Is this as simple as monitoring the regedit files, or were you talking about other things? Yeah,
so I might not fully answer the question here, or not fully comprehend the question, but basically, if you're talking about how can you understand if your existing tools are in the kernel, or, I mean, if that's the question, then definitely ask your vendor and figure out what they're doing. But for us at Endgame, basically in the product side, when we talk about being in the kernel, we talk about twofold. One is what we can able to monitor because of that and the power that we have. So, for example, to a previous question that asked, can you get around things that are trying to say, don't turn me off? Well, because we're in the kernel, we can get rid of adversaries that are even down in the kernel saying, do not remove me, ones that put protections in place to stop that. And on the, sort of stealth side, being down there allows us to do things like hide ourselves from the adversary, hiding the fact that we're communicating, hiding the fact that we are actually a running process, monitoring things that are very, very low level, including, utilizing APIs at the lowest possible point to detect, new file creations and new register creations and things like that. So somewhat to the regedit question, but more, there's many things you want to monitor that aren't just registry creations and registry keys, but also, user accesses, hardware installations, because the adversary could use a driver for persistence, for example. So you need to monitor the different drivers that are being installed. You need to monitor there's many different alternate data streams on top of files. There's many things that you need to look for that being down in the kernel provides you the best means to do, because in user space, any of those things that I'm talking about now, the operating system could lie to me about if I were to ask, hey, are there any alternate data streams on this file? If I'm in the kernel, I would just hook that and say no, and you would never get an answer. So being down in the kernel allows us to avoid the adversary's lies if they're rootkitting things in the system.
Well, we appreciate that, Mike. And unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our time here. But thank you to our audience members for all of the questions. Thank you to Mike for his answers. And if you asked a question that we were not able to answer, someone will get back to you with a personal answer within the next few business days. So don't worry if we weren't able to get to your question. Now it's time to say goodbye. And for more information related to today's webinar, please visit any of the resource links available in the green folder icon at the bottom of your screen. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Enterprise Security, Be the Hunter or the Hunted, the choice is yours. Brought to you by Dark Reading and Endgame. This webinar is copyright 2016 by UBM. The presentation materials are owned by or copyright by Dark Reading and Sumo Logic, and the individual speaker who is solely responsible for his content and his opinion. On behalf of our guest, Mike Nichols, I'm Curtis Franklin. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.